if you're like 99%
you audit. Now, I personally, this is not on the CISA.
Did you know you can make money selling ebooks, videos, and online courses without writing them or having to be a subject expert? That's right. I'm Edmund Lowe.
After completing this domain, Domain 1, you'll be able to understand basically what an audit is and how an IS audit function should be managed. You'll be able to detail the ISAC IS audit and assurance guidelines and standards. You'll be able to discuss risks and how to analyze them, and discuss and understand internal controls. You'll also be able to explain There's an explanation for this knowledge statement. First and foremost, the credibility of any audit is based, at least in part, on the use of commonly accepted standards. It just so happens that ISAC is a global pioneer of IS assurance and audit guidelines. Commentary. As an IS auditor, you're going to see all sorts of confidential information, perhaps be exposed to proprietary data, processes, plans. Failure to comply with the Code of Professional Ethics can result in an investigation into a member's and/or certification holder's conduct, and ultimately in continuous assurance G42. Even if your audit shows that everything meets standards, are we sure it will still meet standards a week from now, a month from now? For just a moment. Once you're done with your audit, one of the big goals is to inform the auditee of the issues. We'll begin looking at risk assessment. How do we determine what is a risk? And treatment. What are our steps to remediate a risk? This will involve beginning your introduction to risk assessment techniques. We'll also be discussing reporting techniques and follow-up. Let's start with looking at risk analysis. This is a process that helps an auditor recognize the vulnerabilities and risks. That's the first part. You have to be aware of what the risks and vulnerabilities to this specific organization are. Now, some risks and some vulnerabilities are common to everyone. Everyone is at risk for a virus outbreak. Everyone is at risk for a fire in the server room. But we also have very specific risks to specific industries. Then we need to look at how do we define controls that can be put in place or may already be in place to mitigate those risks. Now, throughout this lesson, you're going to see several different phrasings of the definition of risk. They're all worded slightly differently, dollars, for every minute the web server is down. Now, in both scenarios, the web server going down is negative.
When it comes to how you talk and how you communicate, you are the person that's responsible for developing that.
The second definition, the potential that a given threat will exploit vulnerability environment. We've already stated that your audit has to be risk-driven, but that begins by identifying the threats and risks. That flows very naturally into identifying those information assets that support the business objective. It may sound odd, but normally an organization has a number of information systems, some of which are not absolutely critical to the business objective. We're concerned information assets definitely change. There are new operating systems. There are changes to threats, any negative action that could harm a system. Vulnerabilities, any weakness that allows a threat to cause harm. Impact, the severity of damage. Whenever possible, we like to express this in dollars. Now, to express that in dollars, we have some very specific formulas. These formulas are also borrowed from disaster recovery and business continuity planning. Exposure factor. This is the percentage value of an asset lost due to an incident. Now, what we mean is in many cases, you won't completely lose an asset. Let's assume you have a database and you do a full backup every hour. Then the worst you can lose is 59 minutes worth of data. Because if the database crashes 1 minute before your next backup, you will have lost. Yes, it's an estimate. No, it's not exact, but it's a good estimate. Single loss. What is risk? Well, you take the probability of something happening times the cost if that happened. For example, what would it cost you risks from outside threats? These are risks, for example, risk. What happens is you did the risk. You looked at mitigating controls and using formulas. As we will look at many different methods throughout this course. Knowledge Statement 1.3 of Domain 1 of the CISA exam. knowledge of fundamental business processes, things like purchasing, payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and the role of information systems in these processes. The purpose of this knowledge statement is to emphasize that before you can do a successful IS audit, you need to understand the underlying business process that's being audited. As we already mentioned, is this an accounts payable system? Is this a human resource? And then apply things that we've looked at in earlier lessons, such as risk assessment, a risk assessment that's particular to the specific fundamental business processes for the organization that you're about to audit. Similar to the Zachman framework is the Sherwood Applied Business Security Architecture. As you might guess, in other words, if you first consider what the business does, what service it provides, and then consider what processes that have been implemented to achieve specific objectives while minimizing risk. They comprise the enterprise structures, procedures, policies, and practices that have been implemented to lower the level of risk at an enterprise. Now that includes everything from information technology projects such as intrusion detection system, anti-malware, to policies, to training, to procedures, everything within the enterprise that's meant to minimize risk and achieve specific objectives. And they can be manual or automated. Now in the information system world, we often think of automated things such as anti-malware. For the entire enterprise, it may or may not be implemented through. Now, IS control objectives are top-level requirements that management sets for adequate control of each IT process. IS control objectives are, first of all, a statement of the preferred purpose or result to be attained by applying controls to particular information systems. In other words, by implementing this control, whether it be a physical login sheet, an anti-malware system, or whatever it might be, what is it you want to attain by doing this? What do you hope will be gained? IS control objectives are also procedures, policies, organizational structures, and practices, anything that's intended to reasonably assure that enterprise objectives will be achieved while undesired events are appropriate and sufficient to support this particular business process. Do we have detective and protection mechanisms? All of these questions need to be addressed when looking at each and every IS control during the.
Let's talk about getting rich fast. Just 1 year ago, you may have friends around you talking about how much money they have made. But what's happened to
Audit methodology are the standard audit procedures that are used to attain the objectives of the audit. This is a documented consumer-initiated credit card transactions. That changes described as the overall audit risk. It's the summation of all the audit risk. These situations require multiple controls to address specific issues in your risk-based audit. That concludes Knowledge Statement 1.5. CISA Knowledge Statement 1.6. Knowledge of the applicable laws and regulations that affect the scope, evidence collection and preservation, and frequency of an audit. Certainly that won't occur in every audit, but if you routinely conduct, you have to be aware of all of these requirements, legal, regulatory, and contractual, so that with audit documentation. You need to have very thorough documentation of exactly what you audited, how you audited, and what your conclusions were based on evidence. To see you're auditing not just medical clinics, not just hospitals, but medical billing companies, health insurance companies, anything of that nature, then these two laws become very, very critical. And again, our goal is not to go in depth. Here's another set of standards that the test will not ask you to memorize. I'm just giving you an example of all the industry standards out there. For cryptography, there are a number of ISO standards used around the world. You see a brief description of each here. Digital signatures, how to handle. If I conduct an audit and certain items were not audited, I want to point that out. These were not audited, and here's why. But for the test, you need to know your scope, The report will essentially tell your findings, and then there will be appendices that that was originally designed as a performance management tool. So it wasn't really designed for audits. It was used to track execution of activities. Basically, it's looking at, here was an objective, how was that objective met? Sort of a scorecard, thus the name. Now, you can use this to measure controls, their performance against an expected value. And you can look at things from 4 perspectives. Financial perspective. How much did it cost? Was there a return on investment? Was money lost? Customer perspective. Sometimes security controls can be so onerous that they negatively impact customer experience. Well, that should be involved in your audit report. Internal processes. Did the controls affect internal processes in a positive or negative way? And then finally, innovation or learning. Have you learned something from measuring this control? Now again, the balanced scorecard was not originally meant for auditing, but it can be applied to the auditing situation. That concludes Knowledge Statement 1.6. Processes to be audited. What are your objectives? Now this is normally CISA Knowledge Statement 1.7. Knowledge of the evidence collection techniques, observation, inquiry, inspection, interview, data analysis, forensic investigation techniques, computer-assisted audit techniques used to gather, protect, and preserve audit evidence. Now what this means is first and foremost, your audit must be supported by objective evidence. It cannot be a matter of opinion. So the next question becomes, how do you collect and preserve such evidence? For your CISA exam, you need to know the various techniques used to gather and preserve evidence. There are several ways to gather information. Inquiry is one of them, literally conducting surveys of key personnel in an organization to discover if particular control objectives are being met. This is particularly effective when part of your audit is checking on compliance with certain policies and industry regulation. Observation. This involves observing people and systems to see if control objectives are being met. Interviews can also be used where you interview key personnel and ask them specific questions. Now, in both the interview and the inquiry options, you need to ensure that you've carefully selected the questions to get optimal information. Don't just do ad hoc questioning. And of course, we have analysis using computer-assisted auditing techniques. Remember, evidence is the information that you're going to base your conclusions on. The information systems are. Now, there are different characteristics that we're concerned with evidence. The confidence level of evidence is based on it's not quite sufficient. And evidence that may not be useful, may not help your audit, but doesn't hurt the department will meet those objectives. Review the information system standards. Are they based on well-known, well-established third-party standards? Or are they internal standards? If they're internal standards, do they meet the control objectives? Reviewing policies and procedures. How does this organization handle a security breach? How does it handle data, disposal of old media? What are their policies and procedures for each of these issues? Frankly, it's impossible to do an adequate audit if you don't know what the company's policies and procedures are. Now, and this is based on the previous review of the organizational structure, you can interview appropriate personnel. You want to make sure those personnel are in a position to give you reliable and sufficient evidence. You may wish to also observe processes and employees actually performing their duties. This can really let you know whether or not the policies and procedures are actually being implemented on a regular basis. You can always reperform a particular task to see if it meets or fails to meet control objectives. And of course, a generalized walkthrough can be helpful. Any of these methods, or in fact all of them, you can use on any given audit to try to gather as much evidence as possible. My personal feeling is you should always err on the side of gathering too much evidence and then leave out extraneous or irrelevant data from your final report. But it's better to have data that you have to pare down than to discover you didn't gather enough data. Let's assume that as part of your audit, you have to gather information regarding the security policies as implemented on workstations. However, some of the workstations are Macintosh computers and you don't have adequate Macintosh experience. You might use the services of a Macintosh professional to do that portion of your audit or to at least advise and assist you. Of course, you'll need to fully document whatever you found, your conclusions and your recommendations. It really cannot be overstated.
Are you a sales professional or business owner who maybe struggles with closing cold leads consistently? Or maybe you've always wondered if it's even worthwhile generating cold leads anymore since the conversions seem to be so dismal. So if that's you, I've got good news for you as I'll be sharing with you
transactions during the audit period, which was last calculated. You draw don't really apply to the population. Because you used poor sampling methodology, all of the inferences you draw are going to be inaccurate. That same thing applies to every audit you do. When you're sampling, obvious is to randomly select, but are we sure we randomly selected? Are we sure we selected in such a way as to not skew our results? Population characteristics. So non-statistical sampling can be used when you don't. Sampling methods are of two types. Transactions ranging from $10 to $100. To know structured query language, functional capabilities of the current existing IA negotiation skills are required, and it's not policy systems, particularly egregious and significant flaws. It impacts the gateway router. How would you react to this news if you were the network administrator responsible for that router? And how can you phrase the issue so the organizational security controls audited? And here's why. Controls in our hypothetical mandated, designed to protect your database. Who understands those needs better than the database? We'll look at the traditional versus CSA approach. Now, before we move on, let's discuss using the services of other auditors and experts. This is a relatively brief but important subsection of this knowledge statement. First of all, we might rely on other auditors, particularly if an auditor came in and recently did an audit of a specific system. Let's assume you're doing a general audit of an enterprise, but just last month they had a PCI compliance audit. It's probably not cost effective for you to repeat the same things that were done in the PCI compliance audit, so you might include by reference that audit in your audit report and use the conclusions of that audit to help you conduct your own audit. Now, obviously, there's always a concern that you're relying on the product of another auditor. Depending on the scope and the level of reliance, this doesn't need to be too great a concern. Normally, you do this when a very specific audit was recently done for a specific purpose, and you're only relying a little bit on that auditor's results. You also may frequently need to rely on experts. Let's assume in the process of your auditing, you use the related controls. We're going to assess the efficacy of those controls as compared to some standard, and this is going to be a self-assessment. It's going to be conducted by the process owner that owns those controls. This can be a management technique used to assure stakeholders, customers, and any other relevant party that the internal control systems are reliable. It's helpful in between audits. If you do an annual audit, you may wish to quarterly, monthly, that. Perhaps you're doing a control self-assessment. What are the objectives of a CSA? Well, let's start with leveraging the internal audit function. We should have some level of internal audit functionality, even if we periodically and routinely. You're going to see much more in-depth details on COBIT as we go throughout this course. COBIT is an acronym for Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology. ISACA first released the standard in 1996. It's been revised several times. In 2005, it became an International Standards Organization standard called ISO 17799-2005. The current version as of this video was published in 2012 and it's COBIT 5.
With 100,000 in savings, do you know that you can multiply that and turn that into $1 million?
COBIT is an acronym for Controllable of risk as opposed to waiting for the next full audit. This will lead to more effective and improved internal. This can lead to highly motivated employees since they're involved directly in their own control, begin to view their self-assessments as a simple, wasteful exercise and become less engaged, and they'll become less effective. Improvement learning curve. You do them whenever it's necessary, you learn and you improve. With a traditional audit, there's other auditors or control entities. Within the scope, this might require internal audit. What about external audits? What are their strengths and weaknesses? The first audit, that will allow you to see if the items listed for remediation in those audits have since been addressed, what systems you're going to audit, how much you can audit, how disruptive your audit can be. All of these are issues that should be taken into account when conducting any audit. Identifying those high-risk areas should be one of the first things to look at when you're going to start auditing and monitoring, because those are the areas you need to audit. Now, this next few points are all talking about risk, and risk-based auditing is an important part of the CISA, and you should expect to see questions about it. Knowing about risks such as inherent risk, known threats and their impact, things like that are very important for the CISA exam. Detection of risk can be minimized by use of statistical sampling. What we mean is the work you put into detecting risk, not the actual detection. So statistically sampling things allows you to detect risk without having to look at each and everything. These are just a few pointers. Really make sure you know all of the major concepts of Domain 1.
Simply learn. Your pace, your place. Hello, and welcome to the CISA Certified Information Systems Auditor certification course by Simply Learn. You have definitely made the right decision to enroll in the CISA course. The invaluable knowledge and skills you are about to encounter by undertaking the CISA course are much sought after, not only locally, but in the international sphere. Sitting and passing the CISA certification exam, which is an internationally recognized certification. We'll first discuss CISA, its history, and its accreditation board, IS Control Professionals, that is offered worldwide by ISACA USA, a range of many other professionals dealing with information technology, declared it to meet its mandate that information assurance, a major review of the curriculum, adopted to just being referred to as ISAC Systems Control, CRISC registered. As mentioned in the previous slide, on changes in the domains of CIS implementation, 19%, approximately 38 questions. Domain 4, Information Systems Operations, Maintenance and Support, 23%, approximately 46 questions. Domain 5, Protection of Information Assets, 30%, approximately 60 questions. Therefore, let us proceed to understand the new syllabus in the next slide. The practice domains and percentages below indicate the emphasis of questions that will appear in the exam. The job practice analysis was developed and validated using prominent industry leaders, subject matter experts, and industry practitioners. The domains and their definitions are outlined in the slide. In the next slide, let us look at how one can become a member of CISA and its exam pricing. A candidate can opt to register for the CISA exam as a member of ISACA or a non-member. Early bird registration is cheaper by $50, while if you register as a member, it is again cheaper by $50, as shown in the table in the slide. ISACA membership is priced at $185, as per the breakdown shown. Remember, the local chapter dues, which make part of the membership fees, may vary depending on the local chapter, technology, internal audit, audit managers, risk and compliance professionals, IT systems administrator, among other IT professionals. So what is it that one will gain on completion of this certificate? Let's discuss this in the next slide. Earning the CISA designation promises a host of gains to those who acquire it. Apart from boosting the professional's confidence in his or her skills and capabilities, other benefits include recognition by peers. A minimum of 5 years of experience are required in IT audit or security in which the applicant should show involvement in the CISA subject matter as covered in the 5 domains. However, there are waivers to the 5 years, such as possession of an academic degree, which may be equivalent to 2 years of experience, while a relevant master's degree is equivalent to 1 year of experience. Please visit ISACA's website for an up-to-date list of waivers. To maintain the CISA certification, the applicant should agree to follow the Professional Code of Ethics, following the Continuing Professional Education Program (CPE) requirements as stipulated in the ISACA website, as well as adhere to the ISACA's IS auditing standards. Note, abide with the requirements in order to maintain the certification. Let's look at these requirements here. Attain and report an annual minimum of 20 CPE hours, and attain and report a minimum of 120 CPE hours for a 3-year reporting period. For more information, visit the CISA CPE policy, consisting of 200 multiple-choice questions, and is sat for a duration for 4 hours, which in effect means that the candidate should spend approximately 1 minute and 12 seconds per question in order to complete writing the exam on time. The CISA exam is offered twice every year in the months of June and December. In the year 2012, these exam dates are Saturday 9th of June 2012 and Saturday 10th of December 2012. The exam is reported against a common scale. A scale score is a conversion of a candidate's raw score on an exam to a common scale. ISACA uses and reports scores on a common scale from 200 to 800. For example, the scale score of 800 represents a perfect score with all questions answered correctly. A scale score of 200 is the lowest score possible and signifies that only a small number. CISA exam is a multiple-choice exam with answers to be shaded on an answer sheet. It is now time to look.
If you need access to a wide range of ETFs, this video is for you. Join SAFSO and you can trade.
Domain 2, Governance and Management of IT, 14%. Domain 3, Information Systems Acquisition, Development and Implementation, 19%. Domain 4, Information Systems Operations, Maintenance and Support, 23%. Domain 5, Protection of Information Assets, 30%. This tutorial will also consist of quizzes as we progress and 3 test papers for checking your knowledge and skills. Let's continue to discuss this on the next slide. How CISA questions. Some of the references for CISA are provided here. A complete and comprehensive list of references recommended for study can be found in the CISA Review Manual 2012. Please take your time to go through the slide. This slide provides you the acronyms. A summary of some of the key points we have looked at regarding CISA certification has been captured for your quick reference. CISA is one among the premium certifications.
The CISA exam covers 5 domain areas. These domains are all examinable with different weighting in the exam. The exam is 200 multiple-choice questions to be completed within a 4-hour period. CISA exams are done in June, September, and December of each calendar year. Below is a summary of the CISA domains. Domain 1 covers auditing information systems and accounts for 14% of the CISA exam. Domain 2.
Hi everyone, my name is Joel, Master Consultant of Imperial Harvest. Many people are curious about the secrets behind the Bazi charts of multimillionaires.
Simply learn. Your pace, your place. Certified Information Systems Auditor, CISA. CISA 2012 Curriculum, Domain 5. Introduction. Hello once again and welcome to the 5th and last part of the CISA course by Simply Learn. In the previous sections, we looked at the process of conducting an information systems audit, including all the guiding standards, guidelines, tool techniques, and code of ethics. We then moved on to Domain 2 of the CISA course, in which we gained an understanding of the intricacies surrounding governance and management of IT. In Domain 3, we exhaustively tackled matters relating to information systems acquisition, development and implementation, which basic systems operations. To an overview of Domain 5, which in a nutshell, to facilitate, Domain 5 content begins with a look incidents. We will then cover logical access controls. Simply learn. Your pace, your place.
The key knowledge statement is to understand the techniques for the design, implementation, and monitoring of security controls, including security awareness programs. Security needs to be aligned with business objectives to provide reasonable reduction in risk. Security objectives may include the following: ensure the continued availability of information systems, ensure the integrity of information stored on its computer systems and security while the information is in transit, preserve the confidentiality of sensitive data while stored and in transit, ensure compliance with applicable laws, regulations, and standards. Let us continue discussing design, implementation, and monitoring of security controls in the next screen. Ensure adherence to trust and obligation requirements for any information assets in accordance with the applicable privacy policy or privacy laws and regulations. Prudence in application of controls is important because controls entail a cost either directly or indirectly by impacting on business operations. The Business Impact Analysis, BIA, is the process used to establish the material adverse events the business should be worried about. The following screen lists the main areas to be covered under this knowledge statement. The main areas to cover here are key elements of information security management, critical success factors to information security, inventory and classifications of information assets, network infrastructure security. In the next screen, we will learn about information security management. Effective ISM is the most critical factor in protecting information assets and privacy. The factors that raise the profile of information and privacy risk include electronic trading through service providers and directly with customers, loss of organizational barriers through use of remote access facilities, and high-profile security exposures, viruses, denial of service, DOS attacks, intrusions, unauthorized access, disclosures, and identity theft over the Internet, etc. Let us continue discussing Information Security Management, ISM, in the next screen. Security incidents and simulated drills. Rewards for reporting suspicious events. Security objectives to meet business requirements are to ensure continued availability of information systems, to ensure integrity of information stored in systems and while in transit. As it relates to security objectives, generally refers to accuracy, completeness, consistency or neutrality, validity, the key elements of ISM. Senior management, commitment, and support. The risk management begins at the top. Policies usually relates to regulatory legal compliance. Let us continue discussing Information Security Management, ISM, in the next and legal counsel. The committee is formally established with appropriate terms of reference. Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, is a senior-level corporate official responsible for articulating and enforcing selection of appropriate controls to mitigate the risk and to accept the residual risk. Follow procedures set out in the security policy. They adhere to privacy and security regulations, often specific to sets of information security objectives. Logical controls govern access to information need-to-know basis, with legis controls, MACs, discretionary access control, transborder data flow, and variations in regulations and may require privacy experts during collection, use, disclosure, storage, and destruction of personally identifiable information. The ongoing assessments conducted when new products, services, systems, operations, and responsibilities of employees, contractors, and external party arrangements include service providers, ISPs, network providers. Types of access include physical access, logical access, network connectivity, organizations for customer access, access control policy, intellectual property rights, and copyright assignment.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simply Learn YouTube channel.
I'm actually really excited about this. Someone's walking around town right now, and they have no idea that they're...
Simply Learn. Your pace, your place. Certified Information Systems Auditor. Simply Learn. Your pace, your place. Hello once again, and welcome to the fourth part of CISA course.
Information systems operations, maintenance, and support practices are important to provide assurance to users, as well as management, that the expected level of service will be delivered. Service level expectations are derived from the organization's business objectives. IT service delivery includes IS operations, IT services, and management, and the groups responsible for supporting them. The CISA candidate should have knowledge of service level management practices and the components within a service level agreement. Service level management ensures that IT services meet customers' expectations, and that service level agreements, SLAs, are continuously maintained and improved as needed. SLAs are generally separate documents from the contracts with external vendors. SLAs may also be created internally to assure the key process owners of the level of service that the IT organization has agreed to provide. Let us continue to understand service level management practices in the following screen. SLAs may include technical support elements such as expected response times, systems availability, for example, 0800 to 1800 Monday through Friday, helper service desk responses, and escalation procedures, and so on. Therefore, SLAs specify the underlying operational specifics for agreed-upon services which, if measured and managed, will deliver the commitments that meet customer expectations. The main area of coverage is IT service management. We shall look at IS service management in the following few screens. IT service management, ITSM, comprises processes and procedures for efficient and effective delivery of IT services relative to business expectations to ensure. ITSM can be split into IT support services and IT delivery services. IT support services include service desk, at times referred to as to technical support, help desk, incident management, problem management, configuration management, change management, system and infrastructure change, and release management. IT delivery services include service level management, IT financial management, capacity management, IT service continuity management, and availability management.
Are you a sales professional or business owner who maybe struggles with closing cold leads consistently? Or maybe you've always wondered if it's even worthwhile generating cold leads anymore?
Although each of these management areas is a separate process by its own right, each process is highly interdependent with other processes. For instance, repeated incidents undergoing incident management may require problem management to be initiated. Resolving the problem may require a change management process followed in infrastructure, configuration item, which invokes the configuration management process. By virtue of being a service organization, the success of the IS department is dependent upon satisfying users and adhering to targets set within the service level agreements. A service level agreement, commonly referred by the acronym SLA, is an agreement between the IT organization, internal IT department or external service provider, and the customer, the business. It details the services to be provided, for example, email, ERP, internet connectivity, internet website hosting, etc. IS service level agreements, SLA, assist in better management of IS services. An SLA will have various targets that will include availability, response time, financial performance, such as ensuring costs are reduced, and risk management through compliance with company's policies. Others include keeping staff turnover at a particular number and overall improvement in efficiency and effectiveness. We shall look at tools that can be used in measuring effectiveness and efficiency of IS service management. Exception reports are automated reports that identify all applications that did not successfully complete or otherwise malfunctioned. They may indicate poor application design, inadequate operations, instructions, operation support, operator training, etc. System application logs can be generated from various systems, and applications should be considered to identify all application problems. The size and complexity of these logs make it difficult to manually view them. There are various programs that have been developed to analyze and report on defined aspects and items. Let us look at other tools of measuring the efficiency and effectiveness of an IS. Operator problem reports are manual reports used by operators to log computer operations problems and their resolution. IS management should review operator actions to determine if they were appropriate and/or whether additional operator training is required. Operator work schedules are reports maintained manually by IS management to assist in human resource planning. Proper staffing of operation support personnel will assure that service requirement of end users will be met. The CISA candidate should have knowledge of techniques for monitoring third-party compliance with the organization's internal controls. It is essential to know the latest approaches in contracting strategies, processes, and contract management practices. Outsourcing IT can help reduce costs and/or complement an enterprise's own expertise, but may introduce additional risks. The following slide lists the main areas covered in this knowledge statement. The key areas covered in this knowledge are sourcing practices, IS roles and responsibilities, and reviewing contractual commitments. Note that these areas have already been covered in Domain 2, Governance and Management of IT. The CISA candidate should have knowledge of operations and end-user procedures for managing scheduled and non-scheduled processes. Operations management is critical in providing effective, efficient, and appropriate technical solutions. The roles and responsibilities of operations management represent a high risk not only to the day-to-day running of the IT organization, but to the protection of information assets both in the areas of restricting access to authorized people and the availability of IT. The main areas to be covered here are information system operations, network infrastructure, and implementation reviews and scheduling reviews. We shall look at information system operations in the next screen. IT operations are processes and activities that support and manage the entire infrastructure, systems, applications, and data, focusing on day-to-day activities. Infrastructure operations management is responsible for accurate and efficient IS operations. The tasks of IT operations staff include executing and monitoring scheduled jobs, facilitating timely backup of computer files, monitoring unauthorized access and use of sensitive data, and monitoring and reviewing the extent of adherence to IT. Others include the operations procedures as established by IS and business management, participating in test of disaster recovery plans, DRPs, and facilitating troubleshooting and incident handling. We shall continue with information system operations in the following screen. Procedures detailing instructions for operational tasks and procedures coupled with appropriate IS management oversight are necessary parts of IS control. This documentation should include procedures for operations, monitoring systems and applications, detecting systems and applications errors and problems, backup and recovery, handling IT problems and unresolved issues, among other procedures. Include error.
TD Ameritrade. Established in 1999, TD has a very long history and it provides very advanced tools, especially for those who want to specialize in options. In fact, this is one of the tools that we demonstrate in our 3-day option class so that we can use this platform to teach our students step by step.
Reports that are used to record failures and corrective action taken. Available in the following few screens. Computers can be categorized based on several at risks and controls of middleware in the following screen. The major risk of middleware is loss of system integrity from multiple operating. In a 3-tiered client-server architecture, the front end scripts. This is an executable machine to tap the full power of the Internet. Popular use of Internet is to download or upload files. This is enabled through the File Transfer Protocol, FTP. With anonymous FTP, anyone can get access with user identification, ID, and password, PW, although this is considered risky. Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, SMTP, relates to or facilitates email exchange on the Internet. Simple Network Management Protocol, SNMP, is a means to monitor and control network devices, manage configurations, performance, and Internet security. Let us now discuss the World Wide Web in the next screen. World Wide Web, or WWW, is a client-server model where the client uses a browser, for example Internet Explorer, to access a web server that could be running on NT or Unix operating system. The World Wide Web is the fastest growing and most innovative part of the Internet. Navigation of the www is done through typing URL of the site and use of hypertext links to jump to other sites. World Wide Web uses hypertext markup language, HTML, for web pages, and Hypertext Transfer Protocol, HTTP, for web server browser communication. Let us continue to look at common terms in relation to the World Wide Web in the following screen. World Wide Web terms that you will come across include Common Gateway Interface, CGI scripts. This is an executable, machine-independent software program that can be accessed by a web page to perform specific tasks. Cookies help a web page to remember preferences. A cookie is a message sent from a web server to a browser to identify users and prepare customized pages. Applets are downloaded from web servers to execute in browsers, for example, to generate input forms. In the following screen, we look at the client-server model and its related terms. In a client-server architecture, an application is split to run on different computers, some on the client and some on the server. These tasks are mutually dependent. On the client side, the graphic user interface can be thin or thick. The server is usually a multi-user system, such as mainframe, mini-computer, or personal computer. Some of the server functions include file, print, database communication, facsimile, etc. Advantages if client-server architecture includes distributing work among computers and sharing of system and data resources. In the following screen, we will discuss different tiers of client-server architectures and middleware. A multi-tiered architecture can be used to show how tasks are shared among computers at the graphic user interface through business rules and application logic and database levels. There are different client-server architectures. These include 2-tier, 3-tier, and multi-tiered, more than 2 tiers. Let us look at 2-tier architecture in the following screen. In a 2-tier client-server architecture, there is a client, for example, graphic user interface and business rules, which forms the front end, and the database server, which forms the back end. Limitations of this architecture include a fat client syndrome, for example, big, complex programs requiring more memory and CPU, and this architecture is not highly scalable. For example, problems arise when more users are added. Let us look at 3-tiered architecture in the following screen. In a 3-tiered client-server architecture, the front end is represented by a graphic user interface, while the back end is comprised of the application and database servers. Advantages of this architecture compared to a 2-tiered include a thin client, and it's more scalable. For example, can support thousands of users. Let us discuss middleware in the following screen. Middleware manages interaction between the graphic user interface and servers by offering identification, security, authorization, and directory services. This in turn supports communication between clients and servers, load balancing, failover, component management, and queue management. In the next screen, we cover uses of middleware. In the transaction processing monitors middleware used to handle and monitor database transaction mainly does load balancing. Middleware in Object Request Broker, ORB technology, enables use of shared, reusable business objects in a distributed environment, for example, Corba and Microsoft's COM/DCOM. In a remote procedure call, RPC middleware is the protocol that enables client to execute a program on the remote computer, server. Lastly, in messaging servers, middleware programs asynchronously prioritize, queue, process messages using dedicated servers. Let us look at risks and controls of middleware in the following screen. The major risk of middleware is loss of system integrity from multiple operating environments and lack of change control. However, controls that can be used to manage this include testing systems adequately, managing modifications, and versions. In the next screen, we move on to our computer hardware. The diagram on the screen shows a broad classification of computer hardware components and the communication between the input, processing, and output components of a computer. Input devices are used to capture data and information into the central processing unit of the computer. The central processing unit comprises of the arithmetic logic unit, registers, and the main memory. The diagram also shows that the central processing unit is connected to the output devices through which processed data and information is communicated to the user. A secondary storage is also connected to the main computer's central processing unit. Each of these components is explained further in the following screens. The central processing unit forms the processing components of a computer. There is an arithmetic logic unit which performs mathematical and logical operations, a control unit, and internal memory used for processing transactions. Input and output components pass transaction information to the computer and display or record the output generated by the computer. Computer peripherals such as the keyboard and mouse are input-only devices, whereas printers form output-only devices. Other components of a computer include motherboard, random access memory, RAM, and read-only memory, ROM. Let us now look at types of computers in the following few screens. Computers can be categorized based on several criteria, mainly processing power, size, and architecture. The different categories include supercomputers, high-end and mid-range servers, mainframe, mini-computer, personal computers, PCs or microcomputer, notebook, laptop computers, smartphones, and personal digital assistants, PDAs. Supercomputers are very large and expensive computers with the highest processing speed, used for specialized purposes, use complex mathematical or logical calculations. For example, huge computing power is used to determine weather patterns, such as probability of tsunami or earthquake occurring in a given location. High-end and mid-range servers are multiprocessing computer systems capable of supporting thousands of simultaneous users. These computers differ from mainframes by virtue of being less expensive. The higher-end ones utilize Uni operating system, OS, and may be used as database servers, while the lower-end ones utilize Windows OS and may be used as application print servers. Mainframe computers are large, general-purpose computers operating in a multi-user, multi-processing environment and usually serves thousands of internal, external users. Mini-computers are used by mid-sized organizations and operate in a multi-user, multi-processing environment. Personal computers, PCs, also known as microcomputers, are small, inexpensive computers referred to as PCs or workstations and designed for individual users. They are inexpensive and use microprocessor technology. Notebooks, laptop computers are lightweight, under 10 pounds 5 kilograms, personal computers, powered by normal AC connection or rechargeable battery pack. They are preferred because of their portability. However, local area network by being portable, they are vulnerable to theft or connectivity hijacked in a LAN, wireless connection, etc. Smartphones and personal digital assistants, PDAs, are small handheld digital devices the size of a calculator. Also known as palm tops, used as a personal organizer in planners, telephone, fax, have networking capabilities, and can interface with personal computers and are used for field data collection and for communication. They use pen-based stylus instead of keyboard. They can also be used as schedulers, phone address book, to-do list, and for office automation, spreadsheets, text editor, for example, MS Word. Some have handwriting recognition capability. In the next screen, we will continue our discussion of computer hardware and architectures and learn about peripheral devices. Computer peripheral devices include input-output devices, audio-video cards, CD-ROMs, read-only memory, DVDs, tape drives, disk drives, printers, and modems. Some commonly used computer terminologies include the following. Multitasking, which refers to running of two or more tasks concurrently by allocating time slots slices to each task. Multiprogramming, On the other hand, refers to running two or more programs concurrently. Multiprocessing is another term used when two or more processors share memory and execute programs simultaneously. In multi-user or time-sharing environments, multiple users access and use computer and the operating system simultaneously. Multi-threading describes a process in which several sub-activities take place when a program is being executed. There are numerous computer hardware developments that have occurred over time, as we shall see in the next screen. Some of the developments in computer hardware include memory cards, flash drives, pen drive, write once and read many, worm, memory cards, flash memory, and universal serial bus, USB. Memory cards, flash drives, pen drive are a combination of USB and memory card technology that is useful in storing information. However, they pose very serious security risks to the stored data if they are lost or stolen and can be used to bypass bootable security checks. Large amounts of data and information can be transferred to flash memory very fast. Write once and read many, worm, includes compact discs, CDs, like the ones used for music, up to 80 minutes, and for data files, 700 megabytes. Compact disc, recordable, rewritable, CDR, CDRW, are technically not a worm. Another example is digital video disc, DVD, that uses optical storage technology with large capacity, gigabytes. Let us look at other developments in the following screen. Memory cards, flash memory, are alternative devices to store information. They are small, non-volatile, removable, and easy to erase and store data information in and can be used with other peripherals like cameras, personal digital assistants. Universal Serial Bus, USB, is a serial bus standard that interfaces devices with a host. It was designed to allow connection of many peripherals to a single standardized interface sockets and improve the plug-and-play capabilities by allowing hot swapping. In the next screen, we look at common enterprise back-end devices. Print servers, which consolidate printing resources for cost saving, file servers that manage organization-wide access to files and program servers that host applications and allow users are access to centralized programs, and web servers which provide information and services to internal employees or external public customers through web pages. A web server is accessed using a Universal Resource Locator, URL, for example, www.google.com. It also utilizes DNS services. Proxy servers provide an intermediate link between users and resources as opposed to direct access. Database server is a repository containing raw data and applications. Web servers process data for user consumption. Appliances are specialized devices like firewall, IDS, switches, routers that could be used to support virtual private networks, load balancing, etc. Now, let us consider hardware risks in the next screen. Computer hardware is exposed to the following risks: data and media loss, loss of flash drives, which may lead to unauthorized access to data, corruption of data, which can simply be caused by improper unplugging of USB drives. Viruses and other malicious software contain infected documents and which can spread via flash disks. Malicious code include keyloggers to capture passwords for hackers, data theft where hackers, corporate spies, disgruntled employees may steal data, use of social engineering to gain physical access to personal computers, losses of confidentiality that may come as a result of losing a memory stick with confidential data. This may lead to legal liability. HIPAA requirements for health information. Let us look at controls to safeguard hardware in the following screen. In order to safeguard computer hardware against these risks, the following controls can be put in place. Encryption fully covered in Domain 5, educating security personnel to be aware of the risk in their environment. To enforce the lock desktop policy, duration based on risk of environment. Update the antivirus policy and enforce mandatory scanning of USB flash drive. Granular control using Microsoft Active Directory Group policy to implement controls. User awareness programs for culture behavior change. Use only secure devices which have security integrated into devices when buying them. Include return information. Include text file with contact details, excluding company name, to allow whoever collects the flash drive to return it to the owner. In the next screen, we look at radio frequency identification, commonly known as RFID. RFID uses radio waves to identify tagged objects within a limited radius. It uses a tag, which is a microchip, to store information with the identification of the product and an antenna that transmits information to the radio frequency identification reader. There are two modes of powering the tags. Active tags that are powered by own batteries utilize higher frequencies, wider communication radius, have more data capacity, are reusable, but are more expensive. And passive tags that draw power from the radio frequency identification reader radiation. It has basic information, 2 kilobytes, uses lower frequencies, smaller communication radius, less data capacity, is not reusable, but it is less expensive. Let us look at the applications of RFID in the following screen. Radio frequency identification can be used in the following areas. Asset management. For example, in the library because it does not require optical line of sight. Tracking, authenticity verification, matching. For example, 2 pairs that have to go together, avoid confusion later. In process control, to initiate processes based on tag identifier. Access control, for example, restricted areas and office doors access and supply chain management, SCM. For example, tracking from manufacturer to retail. In the next 2 screens, we will look at RFID risks and controls. Radio frequency identification risks include business process risk, where interference with radio frequency identification hardware must be routinely cleaned and serviced. There are peripherals. For instance, utilization of over 85% may indicate overcapacity, while utilization of less functions of the operating system include holding of programs that interface between the user, processor, and application software, provides the primary means of controlling operating system facilities include user state is the most restricted and less privileged state, compatible with its operating system. Baseband networks, the signals are directly injected on the communication line and are dedicated to connecting storage devices to servers and other computing devices. SANs centralize the process for the storage and administration of data. In the next screen, we will look at wireless networks where equivalent privacy encryption uses symmetric private keys, which means the end user's radio-based network interface card, sales.
Are you looking for your first home but find yourself being priced out of the sky-high prices of the real estate market? What can you do about this? The first option you have is you can stay at the sidelines and wait for prices to fall, but no one really knows when that will happen. Or your second option, you can improve your financial means to match the market, but that might take years and the property market may also continue to go up. Or your third option, continue watching this video to find out how the fast-track property system can help you to get your ideal home and also potentially upgrade to having multiple private properties without needing a high-income job. Hey, Darren here. I'm a real estate wealth creator with over 15 years of experience, and I'm also the creator of the fast-track property system that has enabled me to upgrade from a HDB unit into a landed property in just 5 years. Whether you're looking for your next property or currently stuck in a HDB, I can help you to upgrade and own multiple private properties using my fast-track property system without you having a high-income job. So if you like what you're hearing so far, click on the link around this video to apply for a free one-on-one consultation with me. Here's why this is important. When it comes to purchasing our first property, we don't think twice about getting a HDB. Why not, right? If everyone is choosing the same option, this must be the best option out there. But the problem usually starts when we don't plan for an exit when purchasing our first HDB. As for me, I realized not only did my HDB not appreciate, it actually depreciated in value over 5 years. And that was a wake-up call for me as I then realized how many of us are stuck in the exact same situation. For my family and my daughter's future, I went out to find everything I could that would enable me to start creating wealth from property. And after talking to countless industry friends and experts, I created this method. Before introducing this new method to others, I decided to test it out on my own first and managed to upgrade my HDB to a landed property and increase my property portfolio from $500,000 to $5 million in just 5 years. Since then, I've helped many families upgrade their HDBs to owning multiple private properties with my fast-track property system, even without them having a high-income job. I'm here sharing my personal story and my proven method so that other families in Singapore don't need to go through the same pain as me when it comes to making the biggest financial decision of their lives. As an average Singaporean, there was I purchased my HDB property, asking myself, is it possible at that time, in my early 30s, to own multiple properties in Singapore? In 2013, I wanted to buy a condominium. There was a freehold condominium in the east, and my wife was very adamant and said, no, we are supposed to get HDB first. We did go for the HDB, and from the years to come, I keep reminding her because I'm in the market and I told her that if we have gotten that condominium, I would have made in excess of $200,000 profits, even after the SSD at that point in time. Whereas my HDB that I purchased, even though it's at a very good location, it is depreciating in value. In the Singaporean family, we all take our advice from our folks. What worked for them at the time, when they bought a property for maybe $50,000, $100,000, today they're sitting at more than $500,000. And this game plan for their life worked out for their generation. I don't see that working out in our generation. And I see it even more difficult for the next generation. My realization came when I had my two daughters. Over the years, when I have seen the prices of property increase, I look at them and ask myself, how are my daughters going to afford a property 20 years later? I always had this dream of owning multiple properties, and I told her not to worry. There is still some way to rectify because I could still decouple either of our names out from the HDB and move on to owning multiple properties. In 2016, something happened. HDB announced that they have changed their decoupling policy. I went back home, very sad, disappointed. What I was planning to do over the years just all came crashing down. I remember one time then there was a possibility. I and my wife were talking and we said, why don't we just get divorced? I keep the house, you buy your property, and we remarry. So it was just crazy. In that 1 over year, if I could find the correct word, I was just devastated. Being in this industry, I also knew that as I age, my loan affordability would shrink. And there is a very high chance that I could never own a landed property in this lifetime. Because I was asking so many people about my
people and business partners. Virtual Private Network allows network managers to cost-efficiently increase the span of the corporate network. They also allow remote network users to securely and easily access their corporate enterprise, corporations to securely communicate with business partners, supply chain management to be efficient and effective, and service providers to grow their businesses by providing substantial incremental bandwidth with value-added services. The following screen lists VPN types. The different types of virtual private networks include Remote Access VPN, which is used to connect telecommuters and mobile users to the enterprise WAN in a secure manner. Internet VPN, used to connect branch offices within an enterprise WAN, and Extranet VPN, used to give business partners limited access to each other's corporate network. In the next screen, let us look at network components. Network components include network hosts, transmission media, network infrastructure components, and network software. Network hosts include servers, PCs, printers. Transmission media includes fiber, coaxial cable, and copper UTP cable, among others. Network infrastructure components, whose significant network components include servers, routers, switches, hubs, modems, and wireless networks and network software that provide the rules for exchange and control of data and process of communication across the different components from end to end. The following screen lists network services. Some network services include file sharing, email services, print services, remote access services, or terminal emulation. Directory services, network management, dynamic host configuration protocol, DHCP, and domain name service, DNS.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simply Learn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here. We're selling websites on autopilot, and it completely changes the way agencies do business. If you adopt
Simply learn. Your pace, your place. Certified Information Systems Auditor, CISA.
Corporate governance is the system by which business corporations are directed and controlled. It is the set of responsibilities and practices used by organizations' management to provide strategic direction, thereby ensuring goals are achievable, risks are properly addressed, and organizational resources are properly utilized. The main aim of corporate governance is to resolve the conflicting objective of exploiting available opportunities to increase stakeholder value while keeping the organization's operations within the limits of regulatory requirements and social obligations. The key knowledge statement is that a seesaw candidate must understand IT governance, management, security, and control frameworks and related standards, guidelines, and practices. Top management will provide assurance to stakeholders that IT deployment is aligned with business vision, mission, and objectives by implementing an IT governance framework. A governance framework will comprise of strategic alignment, value delivery, risk management, resource management, and performance measurement. We will continue to learn about IT governance, security management, and control frameworks in this screen. Implementation of an IT governance framework will lead to an IT governance framework that enables stakeholders to be assured that IT strategy is wholly aligned to the business. Mitigation of risks in the organization through critical controls. Control determination by the risk it addresses. Management utilizing frameworks such as COBIT, International Standards Organization, ISO, among others, to set up good IT practices, monitor, and improve them. The IS auditor using such frameworks to benchmark the practices of a particular organization. Let us focus on the main areas of coverage in the following screen. To cover this knowledge area, the CISA candidate should have a good grasp of information security governance, IS organizational structure and responsibilities, IS roles and responsibilities, sourcing practices, policies, reviewing contractual commitments, governance of enterprise IT, and performance optimization. We will look at some of the best practices for government enterprise IT in the next screen. Governance of enterprise IT governance integrates and institutionalizes good practices to ensure that the enterprise's IT supports the business objectives. The factors that have led to the rise in the importance of governance of enterprise information technology include business managers and boards are now demanding a better return on investment. There is an increasing concern over high expenditure on IT. Let us continue to learn about the best practices for governance of enterprise IT in this screen. IT governance initiatives that include adoption of control frameworks and good practices to help monitor and improve critical IT activities to increase business value and reduce business risk. The need to optimize costs by following, where possible, standardized rather than specially developed approaches. The growing maturity and consequent acceptance of well-regarded frameworks. The need for enterprises to assess how they are performing against generally accepted standards, and their peers also called benchmarking. In the next screen, we will learn about information security governance. Information security governance requires strategic direction and impetus within an enterprise. It requires commitment, resources, and assigning responsibility for information security management, as well as means for the board to determine whether its intent has been met. The role of Board of Directors, BODs, and/or senior management in ensuring information security governance is implemented include ensuring effective information security governance is achieved only by involvement of the Board of Directors and/or senior management in approving policy, appropriately monitoring and metrics, as well as reporting and trend analysis. We will continue to learn about information security governance in the following screen. Members of the board need to be aware of the organization's information assets and their criticality to ongoing business operations. This can be accomplished by periodically providing the board with the high-level results of comprehensive risk assessments and business impact analysis, BIA. In the next screen, we will learn about the roles and responsibilities of Board of Directors in information security governance. To ensure proper information security governance, the board members should approve the assessment of key assets to be protected, and that protection levels and priorities are appropriate to a standard of due care. The tone at the top must be conducive to effective security governance. It is unreasonable to expect lower-level personnel to abide by security measures if they are not exercised by senior management. Executive management endorsement of intrinsic security requirements provides the basis for ensuring that security expectations are met at all levels of the enterprise. Penalties for noncompliance must be defined, communicated, and enforced from the board level down. Let us look at an example of importance of information security in the following screen. Importance of information security. Information security is about setting the right culture towards protection of information assets in an organization. It is difficult to convince employees to observe particular controls, such as need to periodically change their passwords, even on their personal email, and the CEO insists on not changing his or her password. Note that the requirement to change password after completing a given period is enforceable by the IS management from the server side or back end. We will learn about the roles and responsibilities of the senior management in information security management in the next screen. The roles and responsibility of senior management are as follows. The executive management in an organization has the key responsibility of implementing effective security management governance and defining the strategic security objectives of an organization. This focus and support must be carried in a continuous basis. The steering committee has the responsibility of focusing on all security aspects of an organization. The security committee should be representative of the respective groups or functions that are impacted by information security. This allows achieving of consensus and trade-offs on matters of information security, such as priorities, plans, risks, controls, etc., while allowing better communication. The Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, ensures that good information security practices are carried out within the organization, such as ensuring employees take care of their passwords. Let us learn about governance of enterprise IT and various management frameworks in the next screen. Following are some of the frameworks and standards for the governance and management of enterprise IT. COVID-5, ISO IEC 27001, ISO 27001, ITIL, IT Baseline Protection Catalogs or IT Grandschutz Catalogs, Information Security Management Model, ISM-3, ISO IEC 38500, 2008, Corporate Governance of Information Technology, ISO IEC 20000. We will learn about each in detail in the forthcoming screens. Let us begin with COVID-5, ISO IEC 27001, and ITIL in the next screen. COVID-5 is the latest edition of the COVID series by ISACA. COVID stands for Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology. COVID is a good practice framework that supports IT governance and management in ensuring that IT is aligned with business so as to maximize the benefits. COBIT 5 is generic and useful for enterprises of all sizes, whether commercial, not-for-profit, or the public sector. ISO IEC 27001, also known as ISO 27001, provides guidance on implementing and maintaining information security programs. This standard was initially published as British Standard 7799 or BS 7799. ITIL is a hands-on framework that provides a means of achieving operational service management of IT, developed by the UK Office of Government Commerce, OGC, with IT Service Management Forum. We will learn about IT Baseline Protection Catalogs and ISM3. We'll continue to learn about governance of enterprise IT and various management frameworks in the next screen. IT Baseline Protection Catalogs, or IT Grandschutz Catalogs, is the collection.
Stop posting on social media. If you're a business owner or content creator, you should know that 95% of the content created is not useful. How would I know? I made the same mistake too when I started out. So if I were to turn back time, there are 3 things I would do differently if I were to start my social media channels. Hey friends, my name is Sean Sia.
The key knowledge area. An information system strategy. The need to optimize costs by following, where possible. The key knowledge area for a CISA candidate is to understand organizational structure, roles, and responsibilities related to IT. Organizations must clearly define organizational structures which define responsibilities of major functions within an enterprise and how these structures ensure proper segregation of duties. Let us look at the main areas of coverage in the next screen. The key coverage areas for this knowledge area include IT governing committees, information security governance, organizational change management, IS roles and responsibilities, and IS organizational structures and responsibilities. Note that the CISA exam will not be testing specific job responsibilities, as they may vary from one organization to another. However, the CISA candidate may be tested on the roles and responsibilities of business owners, information security and executive management functions, as they are universal function. In addition, the CISA exam may test separation of duties, which is also referred as segregation of duties. Let us look at information security roles and responsibilities in this screen. Organizational structure charts provide a clear definition of the department's hierarchy and authorities. On the other hand, job descriptions provide IS department employees a clear direction regarding their roles and responsibilities. The System Development Manager is responsible for programmers and analysts who implement new systems and maintain existing systems. In an enterprise, a project manager is responsible for planning and executing IS projects and may report to a project management office or to the development organization. Additionally, he or she may have to carry out a number of duties that include utilizing budgets assigned for the delivery of IS initiatives, reporting on project progress to the IS Steering Committee, executing the vision of the IT Strategy and IT Steering Committee by planning, coordinating, and delivering IS projects to the enterprise. Source of system problems. An end user is typically responsible for problems reported, solved, and escalated should be in place for analysis of the problems or questions. Such a procedure will help in monitoring the user groups and improving the Software Information Processing Facility, IPF, services. There are various service desk activities which include acquiring software, SW, and hardware, HW, training end users to use hardware and software, informing the users of hardware or software problems, initiating changes to improve efficiency, determining the source of system problems. An end user is typically responsible for operations related to business application services. The term end user can be used to distinguish the person for whom the product system to efficiently provide continuous IT services, whereas the CISO may be less interested in cost reduction if this impacts the quality of protection on issues and escalate internally within the organization and the enterprise's validation of duties. This individual should be a full-time employee who may report directly to the infrastructure. Security for one individual should not perform this role. For example, an individual with the role of a control group, CG, should not be a system analyst, SA. A system analyst should also not perform the role of a quality assurance person. It is recommended to take a look at this matrix, as it is important for a CISA candidate. You will attempt a question to test your knowledge in the next screen. In this topic, we will learn about the concepts under the Knowledge Statement, or KS 2.4. In the following screen, we will look at the development and maintenance of IT strategy, procedures, standards, and policies. The key knowledge area here is to have a grasp of the processes for the development, implementation, and maintenance of IT strategy, policies, standards, and procedures. The key concepts here are to ensure that IT strategies must be defined on business objectives, and that IT strategy should continue to address both emerging and developing business risks. The main areas of coverage include strategic planning, information security governance, and information security management. We will learn about strategic planning in the next screen. Information systems strategic planning relates to the long-term path an enterprise wants to take in leveraging information technology for improving its business processes. Strategic planning should ensure that the plans are aligned and consistent with organization goals and objectives, and that the enterprise's requirements for IT systems and the IT organization's capacity to deliver new functionality through well-governed projects are considered. The CISA candidate should understand and pay full attention to the importance of IT strategic planning, taking management control practices into consideration. Let us look at information security governance in the next screen. Information security governance is focused on confidentiality, availability and integrity of information, continuity of services, and protection of information assets. The key outcomes of effective security governance should include strategic alignment, risk management compliance, and value delivery. The outcomes are enabled through the development of three things. One is performance measurement, which measures and monitors information security and report on it to ensure that SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound objectives are achieved. Two is resource management, which ensures information security infrastructure and knowledge effectively and efficiently utilized. And finally is process integration, which ensure organizations' management assurance processes are integrated within security so as to improve overall security and operational efficiencies. The next screen will focus on Information Security Governance Framework. The Information Security Governance Framework will generally consist of a comprehensive security strategy intrinsically with business objectives and governing security policies that address each aspect of strategy, controls, and regulation. Other factors are a complete set of standards for each policy to ensure that procedures and guidelines comply with policy, an effective security organizational structure, void of conflicts of interest, and institutionalized monitoring processes to ensure compliance and provide feedback on effectiveness. We will look at information security management in the next screen. Management principles to assess risks to IT assets, mitigate these risks to an acceptable level.
Did you know that you can make money from YouTube within the next 6 hours with a brand new channel and 0 subscribers?
Simply learn. Your pace, your place. Certified Information Systems Auditor, CISA. CISA 2012 Curriculum, Domain 3. Domain 3, Introduction. Hello once again, and welcome to the third part of CISA Course by Simply Learn. In the previous section, we covered the governance and management of IT. The discussion in that section revolved mainly around ensuring that IT delivers optimum value towards meeting the organization's core objectives. In this new section, we get to understand how the different technology components, commonly referred to as IT infrastructure, are acquired and tuned in a manner that fits a particular organization's objectives. This is Domain 3 and is titled Information Systems Acquisition, Development and Implementation. Domain 3 makes up 19% of the final CISA exam, meaning that you can expect to get approximately 38 questions in the final CISA exam. We start off by looking at the agenda in the next slide. Domain 3 Agenda. We will start off by going through an overview of the domain, which will give us an overall picture of what the domain is all about. This will be followed by an understanding of the objective, which states what we intend to achieve in this domain. Task and knowledge statements provide us with a deeper understanding of what is covered in this domain. A list of references provide us with material quite useful for further reading under the Additional Study Resources section. In covering the content, we first look at the concept of benefits realization practices, to be followed by project governance mechanisms. To understand how to run successful projects, we look at project management control frameworks, practices, and tools. To understand risks surrounding projects, we will go through risk management practices applied to projects. This will be followed by IT architecture related to data, applications, and technology. We will have a look at IT acquisition practice, to be followed by another essential concept, which is requirement analysis and management practices. We will then understand the project success criteria and risks, and subsequently control objectives and techniques. It is integral that we learn about the different system development methodologies and tools. Similarly,
I came up with this model called the Bespoke Private ATM method, which is a framework that will help multiple streams of income to be formed for average Singaporean so that they too can achieve their financial goals and retire 10 to 15 years earlier. Hi, my name is Joanne Lai. I'm a wealth coach and I'm top 1% in the world in the financial services industry with over 14 years of experience. During my growing up years, my mom has always been a strong advocate of financial management. So I grew up with a very strong belief in proper financial planning, and my mom actually gave me the book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I read when I was 14 years old. And immediately, because of my gift in math and talent in numbers, I managed to grasp all the financial knowledge and principles very easily. And eventually, of course, I also ended up myself with an internship in a financial institution, and I found that this is the career that I really wanted to be in. So by the time I started my career, I was already way ahead of my peers with several investment streams, and even got my first property by the age of 24. This is definitely not common, and if everybody started as early as I did, they would also be financially free today. But as I look around my friends, I realize that some of them are still
The key now.
Simply Learn. Your pace, your place. Certified Information Systems Auditor, CISA. CISA 2012 Curriculum, Domain 3. Domain 3, Introduction. Hello once again, and welcome to the third part of CISA course by Simply Learn. In the previous section, we covered the governance and management of IT. The discussion in that section revolved mainly around ensuring that IT delivers optimum value towards meeting the organization's core objectives. In this new section, we get to understand how the different technology components, commonly referred to as IT infrastructure, are acquired and tuned in a manner that fits a particular organization's objectives. This is Domain 3.
Exam topics.
Exam topics.
Exam topics.
Your boss wants you to upgrade your certifications, or maybe you just want to land a new job. I'm going to expose the lazy person's secret that millions of IT professionals are using. Because who really wants to spend hours of their life taking mind-numbing courses? The secret is exam topics. They have the questions and the answers to over 2,000 IT exams that are verified and up to date. And here's the kicker, completely free. Stop wasting your time and money on expensive courses and only review the goods you need to know.
In this video, we will discuss various types of testing in SDLC. You will find minimum 3 questions on this concept in any CISA exam. So these are some important tests during development stage. Unit testing. It is a testing of individual program or module. Integrated testing.
Welcome to Domain 1, the process of auditing information systems. This domain will account for 21% of the exam, and it's really the guts of an audit. This is where we talk about how you actually conduct an audit. At this point, we're not as concerned with regulations and laws and technical issues, so much as we're concerned with actual auditing process. And it is a formal process. It's a science, it's not an art. Now for the test, again, this is 21%. But I would say as an actual auditor in practice, this is exactly the place to start. Domain 1.
Simply learn. Your pace, your place. Hello once again, and welcome to the 4th part of CISA course by Simply Learn. In the previous sections, we looked at the process of conducting an information systems audit, including all the guiding standards, guidelines, tools and techniques, and code of ethics. We then moved on to Domain 2 of the CISA course, in which we gained an understanding of the intricacies surrounding governance and management of IT. This was followed by Domain 3, in which we exhaustively tackled matters relating to
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan Marine, and I'm excited to bring you the next evolution in racing, the world's first global autonomous racing league, AWS Deep Racer. Since launch, over 320,000 developers from more than 150 countries have participated. And this year, the Deep Racer League is more accessible than ever before. With the expanded Student League, high school and college students worldwide can compete for even more prizes and glory. Students can get rolling with just a few clicks, no credit card required. Compete online in monthly virtual circuit races against developers in your country and region for a chance to win bragging rights, swag, and travel prizes. Or experience a Deep Racer event in person at one of a dozen AWS summits to qualify for a trip to compete in the championship on a real track. Discover how you can accelerate your machine learning journey at deepracerleague.com.
Do you want to learn how to transform an image with Gen AI on AWS? Join my session at AWS Innovate, where I show you how to create your own superhero avatar with stable diffusion on AWS. Sign up now.
ISACA stands for Information Systems Audit and Control Association. It's an international association where the overarching goal is proper IT governance. Now, specifically for Certified Information System Auditors, or CISA, this is going to be important. The CISA certification provides an assurance to clients that business processes and supporting IT solutions are secure through proper auditing processes. The ISACA Code of Conduct includes 7 items, the first of which is to support the implementation of and encourage compliance with appropriate standards, procedures, and controls for information systems. This comes straight from the ISACA site. The next item in the ISACA Code of Conduct is to perform duties with respect to CISA auditors with objectivity, due diligence, and professional care in accordance with professional standards and best practices. The third item in the Code of Conduct is to serve in the interest of stakeholders in a lawful and honest manner while maintaining high standards of conduct and character and not engage in acts discreditable to the profession. Because if it's deemed that this is occurring, then you could lose your CISA certification from ISACA. The next item in the Code of Conduct is to maintain the privacy and confidentiality of information that you might learn about through the course of the IS audit. And 9 times out of 10, you will be exposed to sensitive information, whether it's data or unique business processes that are unique to that specific organization. The next item in the Code of Conduct is to maintain competency. This means that as IS auditors, we need to make sure that we are always keeping up to date with the latest auditing standards. Also, making sure that we also keep up to date with the latest threats related to IT security. The sixth Code of Conduct item is to inform appropriate parties of the results of the work performed. That would be the clients, because a very big part of IS auditing is to inform stakeholders of our audit findings. Finally, the last part of the ISACA Code of Conduct is to support the professional education of stakeholders to make sure that they understand how the underlying technology supports their information systems and any weaknesses that need to be addressed. An effective IS audit means following standard guidelines. And here we're going to take a look at ISACA auditing standards. First thing to bear in mind is the Information Technology Assurance Framework, or ITAF. This is a set of standards that is published by ISACA. It's a risk-based approach to taking a look at business processes and data and the resulting underlying technology that supports those items to make sure that security controls are in place to protect assets. It also means that we have to adhere to the ISACA Code of Conduct, the 7 items that all ISACA certified individuals must adhere to, such as maintaining client confidentiality, because during the course of an IS audit, it's inevitable that you will be exposed to sensitive information. There are also guidelines for IS auditing that result in audit efficiency, so that the audit takes place in a timely manner, and that the audit report results are effective in conveying information to the client about the state of their security controls for their prioritized assets. There are numerous ISACA auditing standards. Here we have a couple of them, such as Standard 1001, the Audit Charter, which defines things like the audit purpose, the audit scope, and access to resources in conducting the audit. Then we've got things like Standard 1005 listed here at the bottom, due professional care, where audit activity is executed with integrity, care, and communication. This means as IS auditors, we need to make sure that we are documenting our steps along the way while we follow auditing standards. Other standards would include, for example, 1007 assertions, where we verify internal as well as third-party controls, security controls, validity. So if we've got a security control that's already in place, and perhaps a previous audit has determined that it was effective, it may have been at that time. But when we conduct the most current audit, we have to revisit that, because over time, what once might have been effective as a security control may no longer be effective. Also, we've got auditing standard 1201, which deals with engagement planning. The engagement in this case being the actual audit that's being performed, where we look at the audit objective scope and the timeline. Other standards would include 1204. This.
I've been sent on a round-the-world trip to show you the best Sevens has to offer. I'm in the shot. Dubai, Cape Town, Perth, Vancouver, LA, Hong Kong, Singapore, Madrid. I love Sevens!
when my appetite needs satisfying.
As we conduct our IS audit, which really focuses on looking at controls.
I've been sent on a round-the-world trip to show you the best Sevens has to offer. I'm in the shot. Dubai, Cape Town, Perth, Vancouver, LA, Hong Kong, Singapore, Madrid. I love Sevens!
I stands for integrity, and the A stands for availability. Let's take a look at each of these three, starting with confidentiality. Confidentiality is all about protecting sensitive data from unauthorized parties, and is authentic and valid and has not been tampered with credentials over and over again. Contains or consists of central access rules. So here we go, set permissions for finance. That's the rule we just made a moment ago. Okay, we've now got that. These are the top running process computers that you want to receive this software. When I click browse, everyone to forget when that certificate expires, and then all of a sudden, where I can then click the real world, which links to a server. Well, that is a user awareness within the organization and as it relates to the use of Internet of Things. But first, let's define exactly what IoT really is. What we're talking about here is a physical device with embedded software. Now, there are a wide variety of IoT devices, but an IoT device is a device that can communicate over the internet. There are also ways that we can send the resultant data of that communication from the IoT device to a central location in the cloud for processing. An example of which would be something like Microsoft Azure IoT Hub. Now, as a result, we also have to consider not only perhaps the use of on-premises IoT. So it's got Android selected. I could expand that and choose the specific variation. Now, if you've got an older listing for Android operating system versions, it's because the tool you're using is a little bit out of date. So it's always important to apply updates to management tools to get the latest config settings. I'm going to leave them all checked on and I'll click Next. I'm interested in password, security, and encryption. So I'm going to turn on those check marks, and then over the next few pages of the wizard, they will relate to what I've just turned on here. So if I click Next, we're looking at password settings. So require password settings on devices. Yes, we require password settings. Minimum password length, if we're using passwords on mobile devices, let's say is 10 characters. Password expiration, let's say is every 60 days. I would do this in accordance with organizational security policies. Of course, as an IS auditor, we would check that these are set in an acceptable way in accordance with policies. So we could go through and specify all of the details related for this. So I'm going to choose, let's say, alphanumeric with symbols for password quality or complexity. And notice here we've got Although the terms are often used interchangeably, data and information are not the same thing. They are not synonymous. Data is essentially raw numbers, raw text, and raw dates. So in other words, there is no real organized structure. An example of data might include, for instance, details related to So I'm going to go ahead and click Next and proceed. Triad is comprised of confidentiality, integrity, but it is something that we need to think about. A backup power generator, usually used to bring system configuration details made available. It's possible wireless networks. However, there are freely available tools that will still display. Content filtering firewalls, as the name implies, can allow or deny traffic based on the content of the request, as opposed to packet filtering firewalls, which can really only look at packet headers that would include things like IP addresses and port numbers. Here on my wireless router, I'm going to go ahead and log in to create some content filters, and then we'll test them to make sure they block the appropriate traffic. Once I've logged in, I'm going to make sure I go under the Firewall tab, but depending on the model of firewall you're working with will determine exactly how you configure the firewall rule sets. This is simply a consumer-grade wireless router. So the first thing I notice is that the firewall is enabled. We can see that with the check mark, and some other security mechanisms are built in here too, like denial of service attack protection and so on. What I'm interested in doing is clicking on parental controls over here on the left. For an enterprise class firewall device, it'll be labeled as something different, presumably, and you'll also have the ability to configure a multitude of firewall appliances in the enterprise through a centralized policy management tool of some kind. So parental controls in this case are enabled. Down below, I can either filter based on certain keywords that I don't want to allow access to, regardless of what the website URL is, or I can actually filter by website. This means diligent project tracking using project management software to ensure milestones are met. Compliance is going to be important as well to ensure that laws and regulations are complied with throughout the lifetime of the project, and also ensuring that the project is on budget. Remember, the overall goal of IT project management is to carefully monitor projects through all phases to make sure that the technological solutions that support business processes provide value to the organization. Now, being on time with the project, being compliant with regulations, being on budget, these are not things that we only consider at milestones or at the end of the project. They need to be considered at all phases of project management, just like SCAN. So we aren't necessarily testing the actual code itself, but we're testing the security of the overall solution. And that can be done manually or through the use of automated tools that use databases of known vulnerabilities and compare that against SCAN hosts running applications. So that means that our solution then might check for we want to make sure that we are compliant with laws and regulations that affect the organization reliability. So we're looking at load conditions way beyond normal activity. So we're trying to break it. What is the breaking point automated delivery would take place? So we want to make sure we've got an assessment based on your on-premises environment, and let the assessment tool make recommendations for the mapped service in the cloud that would be most appropriate. And often this requires downloading of software. Unit testing means that we are testing small chunks of code. So if a developer has built a new method for an object class, then maybe just testing the code for that method would be considered unit testing, or testing a specific procedure in a function log. The vulnerability scanning process starts with scanning the network. Now remember that vulnerability scanning might be conducted by legitimate users as well as malicious users. Either way, access to the network would be required in order to scan the network. After scanning the network, network devices are identified. And from there, a malicious user, for example, might target a machine that appears to be running a web server. And so that device would be further scanned looking to see what else is running. Afterwards, a vulnerability database is then used to check for weaknesses on that specific network device. So this can be done both by legitimate users internally as a periodic preventative measure to identify weaknesses and then address them, but also by malicious users looking for weaknesses to exploit. So when you're going to run a vulnerability scan, the first thing to consider is what's normal. Now you'll know that after you've run a number of vulnerability scans to determine what should be on the network and what should be running on hosts on the network. So we need to establish a baseline of what's normal. Now it's also important to keep the vulnerabilities database up to date. Most vulnerability scanning tools will have a database of known things to check for on a variety of different platforms like Mac OS, as well as Windows and Linux, and the Android smartphone operating system, iOS for Apple mobile devices, and so on. So the vulnerabilities database needs to be kept up to date. We then need to think about the targets. Which device or devices are we going to scan looking for vulnerabilities? Most vulnerability scanning tools will also have a credentialing option, which means that you can specify one or more different sets of credentials that will be used against remote hosts that are detected on the network so that it could actually make an authenticated connection and find out more about vulnerabilities on that device. Now, a non-credentialed scan is equally as valuable because that might mimic more what an external attacker might be able to learn about a machine in terms of vulnerabilities. So both are valid. Then there's the reporting. Over time, what we're really looking for with vulnerability scanning, besides the obvious, which is weaknesses that need to be addressed, are also changes over time. Now, threats change over time, which is why we need to run vulnerability scans on a recurring periodic basis. Now, that time interval will vary from one organization to the next, and part of an IS audit would be to determine if, in fact, vulnerability scanning is being performed.
Do you want to learn how to transform an image with GenAI on AWS? Join my session at AWS Innovate where I show you how to create your own superhero avatar with stable diffusion on AWS. Sign up now.
你妈妈好吗？她的纸尿裤经常会溢漏，我认为她需要吸收力更强的纸尿裤。
吸收力固然重要，品质也很重要。试试这个吧，我妈妈也在用。
尝试 Life Free Powerful Pants， 吸收力最强的纸尿裤，拥有防侧漏护围，高度增加30%，更加防漏保护。谢谢 Life Free Powerful Pants。我现在可以随意走动，不用再担心溢漏了。Life Free Powerful Pants 没有溢漏，安枕无忧。
Formed periodically, and if not, what that frequency should be. Nessus is a vulnerability scanner. And so what that means is besides just identifying hosts on the network and open ports on those hosts, it can also dig a little bit deeper looking for vulnerabilities within the operating system and its configuration, and even apps and their configurations. I've already downloaded and installed the free version of Nessus, which shows up as a web app on the machine where you install it. And here on that machine, I've gone into my browser and I'm connected to localhost port 8834. The first time you run this, you'll be asked to specify a username and a password, which I've already done. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter those credentials. That puts me in the My Scans folder. I've never done this before, so there's nothing to look at here. But previously run scans, if you've done them, will show up here, and you can go back and look at them to view vulnerabilities. I'm going to click Create a New Scan. That gives me a list of templates from which I can base my scan settings on. So I can run an advanced scan or even just a host discovery scan to discover devices on the network and open ports, or even looking for instances of malware like WannaCry or Spectre and Meltdown, or even running a web application vulnerability test. So I'm just going to go back up here and run an advanced scan. I'm going to give this a name, and maybe I'll put in the date as well. I can also specify the target that I want to go ahead and scan. So for example, I'm going to start at 192.168.0.1 through to 192.168.0.10. So that's what I'm going to do. Now I can also specify credentials that I want to use to scan specific types of devices on the network. So if I click Windows, then I can specify password authentication details, such as a username and a password that might be used to log in to remote hosts. So we can fill in all of those types of details. I'll just scroll up a little bit here. Once I've done that and I'm happy with my configuration, I can click Save. Now we can see that the scan is listed here and the schedule is on demand. Now at any point in time, I can click on that to view the details of the scan and then configure it accordingly. Now if I want to schedule it to run on a periodic basis, I could go ahead and enable the schedule instead of running this just once. And we all know that part of an IS audit should take a look at the periodic assessment of things. In this case, the security posture of devices on the network in terms of new vulnerabilities that might have been discovered that weren't there before. They need to be mitigated. However, I'm going to cancel out of that, and I'm going to go back to my scans, where what I can do is select the scan from the list by putting a check mark in the box, and then we can launch completed before we go back and look at all of the alerts to determine any potential issues in the first place. And if they don't get used. Or whether an employee was engaged in some kind of illegal activity using company-owned equipment like a smartphone. The other thing to think about is, when did it happen? So looking at data number for evidence that was gathered, such as for a hard disk or for a smart integrity can be proven, so to make sure something isn't corrupt or hasn't been tampered with and that it's authentic. And finally, you'll use the Linux dd command to acquire a disk image. Pause the video, think about each of
Yay! Sports!
Well, also what can be very handy, event items related to that same event ID, then we can see here it's related to the volume shadow copy service. With packet capturing, we have capture and display filters that can be used. Capture filters, as the name implies, are done at the time that the network traffic is captured. If all we want to see, for example, is HTTP traffic, well, then we could create a capture filter so that's all that actually gets saved in the capture file if we save the results of the packet capture. As the name implies, you can also have a display filter so that you might have captured all kinds of network traffic, but you decide after the fact you want to filter it by a protocol like HTTP or FTP, or by IP address or port number or any number of characteristics. The other thing to bear in mind is how much network traffic that is needed to be captured for a valid sample, especially if we're going to be using a sampling technique like statistical sampling for our IS audit purposes. Then we might need a baseline comparison. If we're capturing network traffic in order to identify anomalies or suspicious activity, then we need a baseline to compare the current capture to determine, in fact, if anything falls outside of the norm. Wireshark is a free network analysis tool that you can download and run on many different platforms, including Linux and Windows. Here I've already downloaded and installed Wireshark on my Windows 10 computer. Now when you launch Wireshark, you'll see a list of capture. SIAM data sources include web applications, network infrastructure equipment like routers, switches, VPN concentrators, databases, shared folders, and even authentication servers. So what we might do is, within each of these potential SIAM data sources, configure alerts, essentially audit alerts that get triggered when something happens. For example, when a database row is deleted, that triggers an event that we want forwarded to our centralized SIAM system. Or when a file is accessed, a sensitive file is accessed in a shared folder, same thing, we want to know about it. Or when an administrator creates a new user account on an authentication server, we want that to be treated as a security event, even though it's legitimate. The thing about a centralized SIAM solution is that it needs to be tweaked for the specific environment in which it is running, as you might imagine, by looking at all this variation of potential data sources for security alerts. We want to make sure we configure the SIAM solution, which also includes configuring individual data source alerting, so that we reduce false positives. The last thing we want is a flood of alerts going to technicians stating there's a security issue, when in fact there is not. So we need to have a baseline of what's normal then as it relates to each potential data source. What's normal usage for a customer database that we want to monitor for security breaches? What's normal for a web app? What's normal for the shared folder? This needs to be known before we can identify what's abnormal. In other cases, we might need to configure our centralized SIAM solution to be compliant with specific laws or regulations. Now, for example, we might have to have a certain type of encryption strength in place when we transmit over the network and when we store files, data at rest. Otherwise, that will trigger an alarm that will be made known to IT technicians through our centralized SIAM solution. So the alert thresholds then are configured on each individual data source, or it could be done instead of that or in addition to only in the central SIAM configuration. Now what this would mean is that we would have to feed things like log files or log event items from databases, from shared folders, from authentication servers. All of that would have to be fed into SIAM, so SIAM could then analyze that looking for potential issues, and then based on our configured alert thresholds, for example, the number of failed login attempts for an admin account could then trigger an alert to show up in the SIAM console.
When my appetite needs satisfying, I'm craving.
As the name implies, an intrusion detection system, or IDS, is a configuration that's used to detect suspicious activities, or intrusions. This can come in the form of a host IDS. A host intrusion detection system, or HIDS, is specific to a network host. So it could be an agent, a software agent that is configured and listening for activity on a specific device, such as on a server. It might look at running processes, log entries, traffic leaving the host, or traffic coming into the host. And as a result, a host intrusion detection system could have the ability to look at traffic after it arrives at a host and is decrypted. We also have a network IDS potential solution, a NIDS. A network intrusion detection system, as the name implies, isn't specific to looking at the processes and apps and items running on a particular host, but rather at the network as a whole, so that it's looking at network traffic patterns trying to identify suspicious activity. Now, whether we're talking about a HIDS or a NIDS, this can come as a hardware appliance, or it could be software, such as a software agent running on a host, or even a virtual machine appliance configured with intrusion detection software. So it's used to detect anomalies. This means it could look at log entries, and then based on our configuration, raise alarms. But the thing is, we don't want too many alarms raised unless it's critical. We don't want false positives to show up that state that there's a security incident that has occurred, but really there wasn't one that occurred. Intrusion prevention systems, or IPSs, come in the form of host level and network level. Now, they also come in hardware or software forms, just like intrusion detection systems. However, aside from simply detecting anomalies, they can also prevent further damage. So, it can log any anomalies, just like an intrusion detection system can. Based on our configuration, it can raise an alarm if it thinks a security incident has occurred or is in progress. But beyond an IDS, an IPS can also block or reroute traffic. It can run a custom script. Basically, it can be configured to take steps to contain a security incident that is currently in progress. What I do is stop the capture, assuming I've finished with that, and I could type in HTTP in the bar at the top and press. Now, in our example, that means taking $10,000, that's a single loss expectancy cost, multiplied by the annual rate of occurrence, that was once every 3 years, once every 36 months, and when we multiply those together, we get $3,330. So that means that we should invest in computers that aren't controlled by the company to access sensitive company data, and then storing it on USB thumb drives that are probably not encrypted. We should consider implementing a data loss prevention or DLP solution that could be configured such that sensitive data is not fraud or collusion when it comes to business processes. We can use network access control with multi-factor authentication to ensure that multi-factor authentication is used